Welcome to the Meltdown. We're talking the business of sports with host Vince Thompson, the president, founder, and CEO of Melt, one of the leading sports marketing companies in the country.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. I'm Vince Thompson, founder, chairman, CEO of Melt, and this is this week's Meltdown. We had such tremendous response from you last week on our first two Meltdown vidcasts, one on Trevor, I got to eat a little crow this week, and on one with Mayor Ron Anders of Auburn on the economic impact of COVID and the fallout in college football. And what a week it was, is, and has been in the world of college football. And we're going to dig into that today, the business of college football, the business of college sports, and it's moving fast, guys. But before we jump in, very excited to talk to you about the new book coming out, my new book, Build Brand You. It's a great personal branding guide for you now if you're unemployed due to COVID, if you're out in the job market, if you're a college student, if you're an entry-level job. It's about building and curating your own personal brand. It's an output of me speaking to campuses across the country and getting a lot of tremendous response and pre-orders. We'll have information about pre-ordering it as well. We continue our Melt University podcast. We continue, and even more exciting news, a weekly Lunch and Learn newsletter aimed at target students, college students, targeting them with great job tips, career advice from the pros. But let's jump into this week's Meltdown. And as I jump into it, don't forget, you can follow us at Vinny Inc., VINNYINC, on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter, or at MeltATL on the same platforms. This week's subject: did the Big Ten lay a big egg this week with their announcement that they're not going to play college football and college sports this fall? And you can see tons of dominoes beginning to fall with a lot of the other FCS and FBS conferences. But holding firm is the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. And on down the line, once we get a little more clarity, we're going to talk about what that could look like. But let's unpack the new commissioner of the Big Ten, Kevin Warren, who is not necessarily getting rave reviews for some of his rookie performances. I don't know Kevin that well. I was fortunate to break bread with him, the late Commissioner Mike Slive of the SEC, rest his soul, and Paul Feinbaum at Bottega in Birmingham several years ago with the kickoff of the Mike Slive Foundation. Really didn't get a good feeling about him then. Maybe it's my bias against the NFL executives or whatever it is, but it's just something struck me that I wasn't quite sure about in my gut. Not to say he's not a nice guy. Like I said, don't know him. Looking forward to getting to know him and getting to understand his decision-making process. But I will say what did strike me is what I'll say. He has an NFL mentality, an NFL executive mentality, very successful executive with the Minnesota Vikings. So it's not necessarily a bad thing of having an NFL mentality, but I think the decision-making processes and the mindset and the thought is a little bit different than what you may find in the business of college athletics and the businesses of college, because they are massive businesses. As I pointed out many times, presidents of colleges, college athletic directors, commissioners are running multi-million, multi-billion dollar corporations. And so, obviously it's with a different lens of an administrator or an academician. Kevin is also a Mike Slive acolyte. It was really great to see the admiration that they had for one another at the dinner table. It was genuine. It was fond. It was passionate. And you always like to see that bond and connection. I know they go way back, obviously, as do Greg Sankey and Commissioner Slive do as well. But what you also have to understand is that Commissioner Sankey of the SEC and Commissioner Warren don't necessarily know one another that well. So in fairness to them in the process, to get thrown into this giant tumble cycle and not knowing each other very well, obviously it was a shotgun marriage, shall we say, and I use that term with respect. But the late Mike Slive, rest his soul, is the untold story and the connective tissue of this great chess match that's going on between Greg Sankey and Kevin Warren, in my opinion. Interestingly, Commissioner Warren has a son that plays for Mississippi State in the SEC. Now, whether or not his decision has any bearing or impact on his son or not, I can't tell you that. But it is an interesting factoid in this drama. And I've not seen him comment on social. His son, obviously the SEC is playing. I don't know if the son is playing or not. I understand he's a great kid and obviously a great athlete, great lineage as well. But that is an interesting factoid that we need to continue to unpack. As we continue to unpack, did the Big Ten lay a big egg? Because think about the impact, not only just on the football players. I know a lot of student athletes. I've been around student athletes for 40 years since I set foot on the campus of Auburn University. They're dedicated, they are passionate, they're disciplined, they love their sport, they love their school, and we're robbing the dreams of these athletes, particularly if they want to play. And we're seeing all over social media the hashtag "we want to play." So that tells you that these athletes and these student athletes and these students really, really want to play. They're willing to accept the risk. They're willing to waive that risk if things are made correct and right on the other side. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But from a macro perspective, let's talk about this for a moment and really what does this mean? As I said, Commissioner Warren is the new kid on the block. Is that a good or a bad thing? Maybe, maybe not. None of them know one another. As we all say, Commissioner Slive, Commissioner Delaney of the Big Ten, Commissioner Kramer of the SEC, I'll say they're sort of more old school, but they were brilliant guys. And at the end of the day, they might compete, they might skirmish, but they had a certain trust factor. And what I'm seeing between Commissioner Sankey and Commissioner Warren is what I'll call sort of a high-stakes chess game or a high-stakes sort of poker game. And I think Commissioner Sankey was prudent and wise to push the start date to the end of September to see where this virus is unspooling. Maybe there are therapeutics, maybe there's a vaccine. Candidly, we could push this back even into mid-October. With the students going back right now, some have been infected, some are well. Herd immunity could be developing among that. We'll talk about some of the schools are talking about sort of quasi-bubbles for athletes. I think you could do that with the major coliseums and the built-in, but obviously there's student athlete and amateur things that we've got to consider as well. But the commissioners all were in alignment up until midsummer. They had a famous Sunday night phone call, Power 5, who obviously run college athletics and the revenues. They were all in alignment with what they were going to do from a strategy perspective. And that next Monday morning, Commissioner Warren, out of the blue, announced that the Big Ten was going to kind of go their own way. And that really started this sort of duel or gunfight at the OK Corral. The other commissioners, Commissioner Swofford is retiring. Great guy, great gentleman, but obviously in that position, less forceful with the decision. Bob Bowlesby at the Big 12. Now that's interesting. So there's not 12 teams in the Big 12 and there are not 10 teams in the Big 10, but we'll get to that college math a little bit later. And then Commissioner Larry Scott at the Pac 12. a former professional tennis executive with his own set of problems out on the West Coast. And so once that trust was broken on that famous Monday morning, really all the bets were off, and all the rules were, and all the chips were off the table, and all the other cliches that you could come up with. Like I said, in the old days, Commissioner Delaney, whether you liked him or not, Commissioner Swafford, Commissioner Kramer, the grandfather, the godfather of the SEC and the SEC championship, who's still alive, whom, Commissioner Sankey and others of us seek out his wise counsel. In the old days, they would skirmish with one another and with Commissioner Slive, but rarely did they break ranks in this. And obviously, we could talk days and days about the NCAA and President Emmert, but they're somewhat sort of toothless in this Power 5 exercise right now. Obviously, they've impacted D3 and D2 and championships in fall. And when we're talking about tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of athletes who really, if they were willing to take the risk, should be allowed to continue to pursue their dream. And here's a thought. Before, President Trump weighed in, obviously, college athletics, college football, we're in an election cycle. It's a tremendous issue, tremendous impact. It's on the weekly and nightly news. But here's a question. Is the Big Ten atoning for past sins? What do I mean by that? Michigan State, famous gymnast scandal, impacted thousands of lives, millions and millions of dollars in a settlement. Ohio State, Zach Smith, the awful scandal at Penn State and the famous Joe Pa. Maryland, the football player tragically passed away a year or two ago. Iowa, the racism on the football staff. Indiana, player abuse. We're going to go on and on and on and on. So somewhere in there is Commissioner Warren atoning for past Big Ten sins with this decision. Obviously, we know there are issues, the great issues. But again, and then the blowback that Nebraska received just for wanting to play ball. And I know there are a lot of contractual issues. It's a lawyer's delight. Plaintiffs' lawyers are circling everywhere within our business and with our industry. But if they want to go play, I say let them play. Figure out the revenue splits down the line. It's going to be such a massive and seismic challenge for us all in this industry that it's going to take a while to sort this out. What do I mean? Over $2 billion in rights fees paid by the giant television networks. Over $1 billion, $1.5 billion donations. $1 billion in tickets. And I want to question anybody that says these athletes shouldn't be allowed to earn money and compensation through NIL, name, image, and likeness, and social media and their platforms, or if they want to build a fashion brand or things of that nature. And also allow these kids to transfer to other schools right now and allow them to be paid and grant NIL and use of their image right now. Why do we have to wait when all of these issues were bubbling under the surface anyway? So let's talk about what this means, because, by the way, this is with a B. Billions here, I tell you. So who is the Big Ten beholden to? Well, let me tell you who they're not beholden to. The Disney Corporation, but on a limited basis. Disney owns ABC. Disney owns ESPN. Disney owns the SEC network. Disney owns the ACC network. The Big Ten network is owned by Fox and a conglomeration of cable providers and distributors. So when you begin breaking these billions down with who reports to who and who answers to who, and at the end of the day, obviously, it's our clients and our sponsors, who are not being very well informed, by the way, who ultimately pay the bills, and you, through your cable subscription that goes back to the ESPN, of the world at $7, $8, $9 per household that funds these rights and these distributions as well. This is going to create seismic changes at colleges and university athletic departments. I don't think our business, our industry will ever be the same again, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's not a totally bad thing, because the students are going to become empowered, and calm voices and patient voices in the room, such as Greg Sankey, very reasonable voices, are going to merge. But I love Desmond, huge fan. We've worked with him. Don't understand the criticism if Nebraska coach Scott Frost and other players and other teams they want to play. I know my buddy Paul derided Nebraska hasn't been relevant for 20 years, but they are a tremendous brand, great people, great coach. There are a lot of other universities that have been impacted by this, and athletic teams that still want to continue to play. And even if it's a one-year waiver or an exemption or a grant for teams to join other conferences and play and share the revenue or allow athletes to transfer, at the end of the day, let's don't forget, these student athletes deserve the voice. They deserve to want to play if they want to play, and they deserve to go play somewhere if they want to play. So, Trevor, like I said, I'm eating my words here today. What are some of the possible solutions? Today, the U.S. Senate unveiled a Bill of Rights for college athletics. Provide health care. Provide stipends. Coach Spurrier said go from 5 to 15. Maybe that's the number. Provide health care back to the families. Make these scholarships not 1 year renewable at the leisure of the university. Allow it to be a 2-year contract. I know we use the word unionization. That's probably the wrong word, but association. Let them affiliate. Look how they stood together when they hashtag we want to play. You got to give it to them. Let them transfer in right now. Let them use that image and likeness. Let's while the horse is out of the barn, let's let this horse run, and let's see what happens. I mean, what do we really have to lose at the end of the day by trying some of these things? And that's my challenge back to my peers in the industry. Justin Fields, between him and Trevor, probably the number 1 and 2 picks in the NFL draft. If they want to play, let him go play. Does he transfer back to Georgia? And we have a tremendous 3-way quarterback race. Well, maybe we can talk about college sports again. Maybe not. Here's another big novel idea. At the end of the day, I truly believe that you're going to see an exodus of major high school recruits, major college athletes migrate to the historically black college and universities, schools and universities, in their athletic programs. I firmly believe it. It's happening now. You can read about it. I think Bronny James is going to be the first giant one to come in, and then let me assure you, eyeballs will follow. What follows eyeballs? Money, sponsor dollars. It's going to happen, and I'm not so sure it shouldn't happen. It's going to be fascinating. Living in Atlanta, we've got a lot of famous HBCU schools. A lot of those athletic departments have never been quite able to have the resources and the funds that the other major Power Fives do. I think this could lead to great curriculums, sports marketing curriculums, and those types of things. The Celebration Bowl could almost become it is the de facto national championship, but goodness knows where that could go as well. It could impact the College Football Hall of Fame and their display for the HBCUs. But write it down, and you heard it here first. Rapidly soon, there will be a mass exodus of high school recruits and college athletes into HBCU schools and athletic programs. And I think it's long overdue, and I think that it's going to be fascinating. If we don't want to have that exodus, some of these giant salaries the coaches are making, $10, $12, $15 million. Now, I know they generate billions in revenue and billions in awareness for academic, recruiting, programs, buildings, and all that. But what would it hurt for the Power 5 coaches to each drop $1 million into the collection plate and pool that money as resources for all of the athletes in healthcare and stipends and risk and liability insurance policies and those types of things? It's a drop in the money, and I guarantee you the networks would probably drop that money in the pot too. So that was another possible solution. We got to think outside the box right now. Now is the time during this seismic shift in the landscape. As I've talked about, none of these guys are going to miss a meal. None of them. And in fact, I guarantee you, they love these kids so much. They're all like family. If somebody asked them, they would put money in the pot. And again, Trevor, I owe you an apology. I really thought that you should sit out this year, millions of dollars. But I got to admire your value system and your integrity and how you organized on that famous Saturday night, Sunday last week, midnight call, and how you really, the call to action was really the things that we love about college football and college athletics the most. The students, the kids, the athletes. We forget that in all of these other things. At the end of the day, the power and influence is shifting as it should to the student athletes. And let's see where this goes as well. Final thoughts. There will not be a spring football season. It makes no sense on about 1,000 levels. Kids haven't played in a long time. You're not going to have 2 seasons. You're going to have a lot of stars sit out. They're training for the draft. They're training for the combine. Then you're going to expect them to turn right around and play in the fall. It just doesn't work that way, and it wouldn't work that way. Not only that, spring is the busiest time of the year. School is getting out, graduations, parties, summer vacations. There's no consistency on when people get out of the school as well. And you've got all these other amazing spring sports going on both in the colleges, and every league is playing with the exception of the NFL in the spring. So spring season, total non-starter. No union, but player association. Don't sacrifice these programs for quote-unquote non-revenue and Title IX programs. These kids work just as hard as the football players. And let's bring in some more business thinking from the outside as well, because this is our next generation of leaders. This is the next generation of brand love, as well, because in the end, Disney is in the entertainment business and the live people business. They're suffering. Is that going to bleed down into ABC, ESPN, and all the rights that are paid? What about the fans? Will it be safe? Will they find other things to do? Can they afford it? Or are you even safer? It was challenging enough to get fans to these games, a lot of these now, but is it safer just to buy really nice television and stay home and watch everything? Now everything is moving toward a fanless environment. But it's going to make a big impact in college football. Keep the NFL out of the Saturday inventory. That's our space. That's our time. I know it's shelf space. I know it's money. I know it's revenue. I know it's sponsored dollars. But once they're in there, I don't believe you'll ever get them out. And goodness knows, where that will go. Keep an eye on what we call the multimedia rights, the third-tier rights holders, Learfield and IMG. They pay millions and millions of dollars in guarantees to the athletic departments as well. And then finally, the sponsors. If there's no college sports, will they rethink where they'll be spending that dollar down the road? I get these questions all the time. So, in summary, it is amazing the chaos in the football. Everybody's weighing in on it. I personally believe the Big Ten laid a big fat egg. Those are my thoughts. What's yours? Don't forget the book. Don't forget to follow me at Vinny Inc. or at MeltATL. Thank you. I'm Vince Thompson for The Meltdown.
Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at MeltATL, and follow Vince at Vinny Inc. and on LinkedIn as Vince Thompson.